Hi there. Welcome back to Bible Break. Well, this will be our last one of 2021. It's New Year's Eve, so I'd just like to wish you a very happy New Year 2022. Before we start, we're in Genesis 15, and it's not that long a chapter again. So we're going to read. We're going to carry on with our little series now in Genesis, and we're going to read chapter 15, and I'm reading from the NIV as usual. Genesis 15, continuing the story of Abram. After this, the word of the Lord came to Abram in a vision. Do not be afraid, Abram. I am your shield, your very great reward. But Abram said, O sovereign Lord, what can you give me, since I remain childless, and the one who will inherit my estate is Eliezer of Damascus? And Abram said, You have given me no children, so a servant in my household will be my heir. Then the word of the Lord came to him, This man will not be your heir, but a son coming from your own body will be your heir. He took him outside and said, Look up at the heavens and count the stars, if indeed you can count them. Then he said to him, So shall your offspring be. Abram believed the Lord, and he credited it to him as righteousness. He also said to him, I am the Lord who brought you out of Ur of the Chaldeans to give you this land to take possession of it. But Abram said, O sovereign Lord, how can I know that I shall gain possession of it? So the Lord said to him, Bring me a heifer, a goat, and a ram, each 3 years old, along with a dove and a young pigeon. And Abram brought all these things to him, cut them in two, and arranged the halves opposite each other. The birds, however, he did not cut in half. Then birds of prey came down on the carcasses, but Abram drove them away. So Abram was there in the middle, you see, driving these birds of prey away, but he was in the middle between the two halves of the sacrifice. Verse 12, as the sun was setting, Abram fell into a deep sleep, and a thick and dreadful darkness came over him. Then the Lord said to him, Know for certain that your descendants will be strangers in a country not their own, and they will be enslaved and ill-treated 400 years. But I will punish the nation they serve as slaves, and afterward they will come out with great possessions. You, however, will go to your fathers in peace and be buried at a good old age. In the 4th generation, your descendants will come back here, for the sin of the Amorites has not yet reached its full measure. Well, I always thought that a generation was 40 years as opposed to 100, but it looks as if it's being considered as 100 years here for when they would leave Egypt and come back. When the sun had set and darkness had fallen, a smoking fire pot with a blazing torch appeared and passed between the pieces. On that day, the Lord made a covenant with Abram and said, To your descendants, I give this land from the river of Egypt to the great river, the Euphrates, the land of the Kenites, Kenizzites, Cadmonites, Hittites, Perizzites, Rephaites, Amorites, Canaanites, Girgashites, and Jebusites, the land of the ites. So, marvelous, New Year's Eve. A time when I can't say that I do it because I know myself better than that. But a time when many people, make resolutions, New Year's resolutions, which they hope to keep. And big congratulations to you if you've ever managed to keep one of your New Year's resolutions. I mean, we've all got the silly resolutions as well, haven't we? I could easily make a resolution not to eat parsnips. There are other resolutions that I might not find so easy, or Brussels sprouts. But here we are, chapter 15, and the thing that strikes me as I read through this chapter is Abram's irresolution. His irresolution. Or what I mean by that is the fact that he clearly has doubts as to what's going on and where he stands in what's going on. Let me explain. The first thing I note is that God can see that Abram is afraid. I don't suppose that he would say to him, "Don't be afraid, Abram," in that, was it the first or second verse? First verse. I don't suppose that our reading would have started with God saying to Abram not to be afraid if he didn't know that he was afraid. And then he says, "I am your shield, your very great reward." Well, I think to understand this promise of God to Abram here, this reassurance to Abram here at the outset, I think we have to appreciate our last reading, which, as you will recall, saw us fighting Kedorlaomer and his allies, and making it clear to the king of Sodom as well, in terms of the land where he was, that he didn't mind keeping his distance from him. Basically, Abram has just been in a battle, if not a war, and he's upset a lot of people. There are a lot of people now who might see him in the ascendant and as being something of a threat. And it might be that he's not sleeping well. I don't know the reason for his vision, but he is afraid by God's own word. And just as it was God who had granted him that victory when he recovered his nephew Lot from the kidnappers, let's call them, and Abram and Melchizedek, the priest king who met him coming back from the battle, they recognized God's hand in what had happened. So God reaffirms here that Abraham doesn't need to worry about these people who he's obviously got on the wrong side of in fighting against them, because it's he himself, God himself, who is Abram's shield and Abram's reward. Now, if you are facing problems and uncertainty going into the new year, particularly for having done the right thing and being on the side of right, then that might be something that you might want to take hold of. God's promise to you to be your shield and your reward in the good fight which you have fought and might even well still be fighting. Secondly, God confirms his promise, which he had already made to Abram, that he will have a son. He himself will have a son. Because this is a promise that God had already made to Abram concerning his posterity. But we can see how Abram's faith is far from being, 100% all the time. And we see this in the terms in which he speaks to God. And this is the essential thing, of course. Not that we have to have this thing that we have called faith that has to be perfect as far as we are concerned, because God is going to reward our wonderful faith. No, our faith does and can only exist, should only exist, in terms of our relationship to God, with God. And Abram honestly expresses his doubts concerning God's promise to him. Well, you talk grandly and wonderfully to me, Lord, about my posterity and how you will make them more than the sand and the seashore, and how you're talking here about the stars in the sky. But I haven't even had a child yet. There's no child has come from me yet. And the one who's set to be my heir is just somebody who was born in my household, Eliezer of Damascus. But no, Abram expresses his doubts. God has his resolutions. God remains resolute. God holds to his promises. However long it might take, however roundabout might be the road getting there, God holds to what he has promised, and he reassures Abram here that he will have a son and he will have a posterity. And then finally, this battle which Abram has just emerged victorious from, great at the time, of course, but the other question that is in his mind is that the country which God has led him to might not be as safe and secure as all that. And so Abram also has questions about the land which God has had promised him. And it's just here that God has Abram make a sacrifice. Abram stands in the middle of the sacrifice, fending off the birds of prey who've come down for the corpses. Interesting image which the Lord Jesus picks up in the New Testament as he goes towards his death. But here's Abram in the middle of the sacrifice and fighting off the birds of prey. And following that, he's probably quite tired. At any rate, he falls asleep, and the Lord grants him a terrible vision, or prophecy, we should say, really, because he speaks to him in his sleep of the what's going to happen to the future, in the future. That it's not as though his descendants will just like that inherit the land, but it will be after their descent into Egypt later on, 400 years of slavery there, and then the Exodus with Moses, of course, and they will be brought back to the promised land. But and the reason for this, by all accounts, is that the wickedness of one of the tribes, at least in the land, will have to reach its term before God finally judges them and drives them out. So all this, of course, is in God's plan, God's program, God seeing the end from the beginning, and God knowing far more than Abram, than you or me, and anyone else. But he does give Abraham insider knowledge concerning the future, with the reassurance that the nations who are in the land, when the Israelites finally return to the land, with Joshua, of course, there, they will drive out these nations and they will inherit the land. So, maybe that's something for a change which we should keep with us this new year. That our resolutions might not count for very much, necessarily, but God's certainly do. And there where our faith in God is wavering, or we have very serious fears for the future, and very serious questions, even concerning God's promises, that God remains resolute, and it's him that we should cling to, and it's him that we should walk with going into 2022. So again, let me wish you a very, very happy new year, and I'll catch up with you again in 2022. Happy New Year.